"Let go of my mom and I'll put you back on your feet," said the black boy. The court laughed. Then the impossible unfolded. The words came from a 12-year-old black boy, yet they crashed through the courtroom with the force of a gunshot. Malik Turner stood there, small in size but unshaken, his voice echoing off marble walls. At the bench, Judge Arthur Blake, paralyzed from the waist down for 8 years, froze with his hand still on the case file. He blinked, certain he must have misheard. A child had just promised the one thing every doctor, surgeon, and specialist in the country had already failed to do. Then came the laughter, mocking, cruel, echoing. Reporters snickered. Attorneys shook their heads. A woman in the gallery whispered loudly, "Poor boy. Poverty breaks their minds." The prosecution table exchanged smirks, amused by the boy who dared utter something so impossible. Malik did not flinch. He didn't shuffle. He didn't lower his eyes. His stare swept across every face in that courtroom, calculating, memorizing, cataloging. He looked less like a child and more like someone who had already studied the world and found it rotten. His mother, Ruth Turner, sat trembling in handcuffs. 15 years she had cleaned this courthouse, its halls, its offices, its secrets. Now she was accused of stealing $50,000 from the administrative safe. No proof, no motive. Just the convenient suspect, a poor black janitor. Judge Blake finally spoke, his voice sharp and cold. "Boy, this is a court of law, not a circus. Your mother is guilty. There are no miracles here." More laughter, but Malik didn't look at the judge. His gaze had locked onto Evan Cole, the judge's assistant, the only man in the room who wasn't laughing. Evan's breathing had gone shallow. His eyes wouldn't lift. His fingers tapped anxiously on the table every time the stolen money was mentioned. And Malik noticed everything. "I know who took it," Malik said calmly. "And I can prove it." The room exploded again, louder laughter, louder mockery. "Go ahead, little Sherlock." Someone shouted. For the first time, Malik smiled, thin, cold, and humorless. "Release my mother," he said, "and I'll make you walk again." No one saw the small digital recorder hidden in his backpack. No one realized the boy had spent 6 months tracking whispers, schedules, keys, and faces. No one imagined this child had been conducting a secret investigation while the adults dismissed him as powerless. But someone did feel fear. Evan Cole. Judge. Blake slammed his gavel so hard the sound cracked through the air. "Enough. This court will not tolerate fantasy. The defendant had access, opportunity, and motive. Poverty is motive enough." The room approved with cruel chuckles. Malik's jaw tightened, but his eyes remained ice. He had seen this world before, when police raided his home at 8 years old for drugs that never existed. When teachers assumed intelligence was suspicious for a boy like him. He wasn't pleading, he was hunting. And the man with the new Rolex, the one a court assistant could never afford, was his prey. Evan Cole's fingernails were immaculate. His Rolex gleamed. Outside, his BMW sat in the staff lot. All details an average 12-year-old would have missed. But Malik Turner was no average 12-year-old. When life teaches you injustice early, you learn to observe what others ignore. Judge Arthur Blake leaned forward, eyes dripping with contempt. "Defendant, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Ruth Turner trembled. I've never stolen a thing in my life," she whispered through tears. I work to raise my son." Prosecutor Mercer chuckled, loud enough for the gallery to hear. A black single janitor preaching honesty. Adorable. A few people even nodded along. Malik's fists curled. At 12, he already understood a bitter truth. This system was never built for them. He had watched his mother get talked down to, dismissed, ignored, and insulted. But while they belittled her, Malik had listened, memorized, and learned. "My mother didn't steal that money," Malik said again, louder this time. "And I can prove it," the courtroom answered with laughter. "Sure, kid," someone yelled. "What'll you show us? Your crayons?" But someone didn't laugh. Evan Cole. His eyes darted. His breathing hitched. His fingers, once confident, now trembled. The laughter died when Judge Blake sneered, "You pathetic child. You can't change reality. Your mother is a thief. And you, well, you're the son of one. Accept it and stop wasting this court's time." Malik inhaled slowly. then smiled that same unsettling adult-like smile. "Are you sure you want to continue?" he asked. "Because when I prove she's innocent, you'll have to keep your part of the deal." Blake's brow furrowed. "What deal?" "I'll make you walk again." "Remember?" Silence. Then another explosion of laughter, everyone mocking him again, except Evan Cole, who now looked like a man watching his own coffin being nailed shut. The judge pounded the gavel. "Guards, remove this child before I hold him in contempt." Malik didn't move. 6 months, he said clearly. "That's how long I've spent investigating everyone in this courtroom." The words sliced the air. Cole froze. His hands shook so violently he hid them under the table. Malik locked eyes with him, unblinking. 6 months watching, listening, taking notes. Adults think kids are invisible. That we don't hear, that we don't understand. But we do. And then, the boy is right. Head snapped toward the back. A tall black woman in an immaculate navy suit strode down the center aisle with controlled fire in her steps. "Attorney Celine Graves," she announced, flashing her credentials. "New York Bar. I am here to represent the Turner family." Prosecutor Mercer went pale. Celine Graves was a national threat to corrupt courts. 97% win record. Known for dismantling racist legal structures brick by brick. How did you get involved?" Mercer stuttered. Celine smiled. "A very intelligent young man contacted me 3 weeks ago." Malik's eyes flickered with relief. For 3 weeks, Malik and Celine had worked in secret. He became her hidden informant, mapping movements, tracking patterns, gathering proof. He discovered Evan's casino trips, his fresh BMW, his cash-bought $300,000 home. Celine turned to Judge Blake. "Your Honor, I am filing an immediate motion to reopen the investigation into the missing $50,000. I have concrete evidence identifying the real thief." The room erupted in gasps. Blake slammed the gavel. "Denied. This case is closed." Celine didn't flinch. "Under federal statute, I have the right to present new evidence if racial bias influenced the ruling." She reached into her briefcase and produced a stamped document. "This is a federal order authorizing a full investigation into this court." And just like that, the room that once laughed now feared. Evan Cole tried to slide out of his seat when Malik pointed at him. "Mr. Cole," Malik said, voice even, "you're welcome to stay. You work with the judge. You must be curious who actually took the money." The color drained from Evan's face. He sat frozen, every practice tick now a giveaway. Celine Graves closed her folder with slow intent. "Mr. Cole," she said, eyes cold, "how did you afford a $300,000 house last month on a $45,000 salary?" The courtroom inhaled as one. Malik watched everyone. Mercer riffling papers, Judge Blake gripping the arms of his wheelchair until veins stood. Evan's jaw slack. 6 months of watching had taught Malik to read the smallest tells. A gulp, a stashed glance, a hand that trembled when money was named. "Only 3 people have access to that safe," Malik continued. "My mother, the judge, and Mr. Cole." A bomb dropped into the stunned hush. Celine opened another folder and slid a printout across the lectern. "Show them the footage," she said. Malik stepped forward, breath steady. For weeks he'd spotted what everyone missed. Blind spots in the vault hallway cameras, but perfect coverage of the parking lot. The parking cam recorded entries and exits at odd hours. Exact timestamps Evan could never explain away. "March 15th, Malik said. A Friday, 11:47 p.m. The parking cam shows you returning to the building." Evan bolted upright, chair skittering back. "What, I need to step out," he stammered. 2 men in dark suits rose from the back. Agent Mira Morales and Agent John Ruiz moved forward with quiet authority. "Mr. Cole," Agent Morales said, "we need to speak with you about recent financial irregularities." Evan's face went white. He stood trembling. Hands hidden under the table now shook in plain view. Federal agents guided him out, one arm at each elbow, while the courtroom watched like spectators at a slow-motion fall. Malik turned his attention to Judge Blake. The judge watched his assistant escorted away, his composure unraveling. For the first time in 8 years, paralysis and power had been matched by a different force. Exposure. "Do you still think my mother stole the money?" Malik asked quietly. The judge's mouth worked. The gallery leaned forward, hungry for the answer. Instead of a rebuttal, A different sound filled the room. Malik's small laptop being connected to the courtroom speakers. Celine nodded. Malik had been recording. For 6 months he had captured whispers meant to vanish into corridors. The casual slurs, the conspiratorial jokes, the resigned acceptance that certain verdicts required no evidence. The first file played. Alan Mercer's voice cut clear through the speakers. Blacks always steal when they get the chance. It's in their nature. Laughter, Judge Blake's, followed like an approving afterthought. The room combusted into stunned murmurs. Cameras flashed. Reporters stood, pens poised. Malik, now calm and merciless, clicked to the next file. Judge Blake's tone surfaced, smooth and lordly. These black cases, guilty until proven innocent. Saves the court time. Each recording was a brick removed from the judge's facade. Mercer's defensiveness, Blake's complicit amusement. Offhand comments that once lived in private were now public evidence. Celine moved like a hunter closing the net. These recordings have been forwarded to the National Council of Magistrates, the press, and the FBI, she announced. The federal office has already opened an inquiry. Judge Blake's face flushed, then paled. He stammered that words were taken out of context. No one believed him. The gallery that had laughed at the boy hours earlier now watched him with a new, dangerous respect. Malik stood unblinking, as the adults around him finally realized what he had always been, a witness who would not be dismissed. Malik let the courtroom choke on its own silence. Judge Blake tried to regain authority with his stare, but it no longer worked. Malik had taken the power in the room, and everyone knew it. He leaned forward at the table, voice steady. Judge Blake, would you like me to play the recording where you said you wanted to teach that arrogant black family a lesson? Alan Mercer flinched. Malik didn't even turn to look at him before continuing. And Mr. Mercer, should I jump to April 3rd? 2:37 in the afternoon. You said, and I quote, these blacks need to stay in their place or society falls apart. I have the timestamp. I have the file. And I have your voice. Mercer shrank behind a pile of useless paperwork. He understood what was happening now. This wasn't a boy with accusations. This was evidence. Cataloged, dated, cross-checked. 6 months of surveillance. Every comment, every bias, every manipulation of the law. Malik hadn't come to court to argue innocence. He came to expose an ecosystem. Attorney Selene Graves rose, voice deliberate and lethal. Your Honor, based on the documented pattern of racial bias, the defense formally moves for the immediate exoneration of Ruth Turner and the opening of a federal civil rights inquiry against this bench. Before Judge Blake could respond, his posture changed. His breath shortened. A numbness he lived with for 8 years shifted. A shock ran through his legs. Pressure, tingling, movement. The courtroom froze. Judge Blake stared downward, terrified and confused. His toes moved inside his shoes. Doctors would later call it psychosomatic paralysis reversal. Others would call it guilt, stress, divine irony. Malik didn't move. His eyes never left the judge. You feel that, don't you? Blake's hand trembled as he gripped the table. He tried to stand. His legs, unused for nearly a decade, responded in violent, trembling motions. Cameras snapped. Reporters rose. The man who mocked a child now fought gravity like a wounded animal. He stood, not victorious, exposed, undressed, powerless. Malik spoke without raising his voice. I told you I'd make you stand. I never said how. There was no applause, no triumph, just the collapse of a man who had believed himself untouchable. Ruth Turner buried her face in Celine's shoulder, finally free from the shadow that had strangled her life. Malik remained still, his expression unchanged. Justice was not a performance. It was a correction. Judge Blake's new ability to walk was the final humiliation. A man who once imprisoned others was now free to move with no direction left to go. 6 months later, the aftermath was absolute. Blake resigned. His recordings played on every national outlet. He could walk again, but no institution would touch him. His name became shorthand for judicial disgrace. Evan Cole received 8 years in federal prison. The stolen money, the gambling trail, the late-night entries, everything unraveled. His BMW seized, his house repossessed, his wife gone. Alan Mercer was stripped of his license. Law schools used his quotes as material in lectures about systemic bias and prosecutorial misconduct. He fled to another state to sell insurance to strangers who would never know who he was. Malik Turner became a national headline. Interviews, documentaries, scholarships promised before he even reached high school. But Malik rejected the narrative of child hero. He didn't care about fame. He cared that the system now knew someone was watching. Selene Graves became his mentor, shaping him for a future in law. Ruth Turner, fully cleared, was promoted to administrative supervisor in the reformed district court. The court that once humiliated her now signed her checks. Malik had proven a single principle: underestimating someone because of race, class, or age is not just immoral. It is dangerous and irreversible once the truth is on record. If the flow matches your expectation, confirm with. Ruth Turner stood before the crowd on the steps of the newly reformed District Justice Center. Cameras flashed, but her voice remained calm and grounded. "I worked in this building for 15 years, she said, steady and deliberate. And for 15 years, I was invisible. My son reminded me that visibility isn't granted, it's taken. The moment we decide to stand up for what's right, we make ourselves impossible to ignore." Her words carried further than the microphones could reach. They became a declaration for an entire city forced to confront what it had long ignored. The transformation that followed was unlike anything the city's judicial system had ever seen. Malik's recordings triggered a federal investigation that rewired the very core of its operation. Every courtroom was fitted with high-definition cameras and mandatory audio surveillance. Anonymous complaint hotlines were created. All judges and prosecutors were ordered to complete certified racial bias training before they could return to work. Malik Turner became an emblem of a new generation. Sharp, analytical, unafraid. He launched a YouTube channel titled Justice at 12, where he taught other children how to identify discrimination, document wrongdoing, and understand their legal rights. "Injustice doesn't wait for adulthood," he said in one of his first videos. So why should we? A year later, Malik sat beneath the bright lights of the nation's largest news network. Across from him, the host leaned forward with curiosity. "How did you know you could prove your mother's innocence?" Malik gave the same calm smile he had worn through every hearing, every headline. "I didn't know," he said, "but I knew I had to try. My mother taught me that when you see injustice, you only get two choices: accept it or fight it. Accepting it was never an option." Then came the question everyone had been waiting for. What about Judge Blake? How do you explain his recovery? Malik paused, not out of hesitation, but precision. "Sometimes," he said, "the body remembers truth more deeply than the mind does." Judge Blake lived paralyzed by his own corruption. When truth finally reached him, it broke the lie he built his body around. That wasn't magic, that was consequence. Miles away, Judge Arthur Blake watched the broadcast from a dim apartment he rented under a false name. His legs moved freely. Now, he walked perfectly, but each step felt heavier than before. The miracle everyone celebrated had become his curse. He had regained motion but lost every reason to move. His reputation, his status, his power, gone. The child he mocked as inferior had forced him to confront a truth that stripped him bare. Evan Cole, his former assistant, was serving time in a federal penitentiary. The inmates knew his name well, and none of them treated him kindly. He had once forged evidence against an innocent woman. Now, the very people he once condemned made him relive it daily. Prosecutor Alan Mercer had vanished from the public eye. He worked at a small-town insurance office, avoiding questions about his past. Whenever someone recognized his name, he changed the subject or walked away. Attorney Selene Graves became one of the most sought-after civil rights litigators in the country. She and Ruth Turner built a legal fund that defended families wronged by systemic bias. Their partnership grew into a movement. Malik, now 15, studied at a prestigious private academy on a full scholarship. His mother had bought their first home, a modest 2-story brick house with a small garden. Malik tended himself. Despite national fame, he remained private, focused, strategic, already planning his next project, a documentary series on youth advocacy called Silent No More. Judge Blake often saw Malik's face on television and turned it off each time. He told himself it was guilt, but deep down he knew it was fear. The same fear that once made him hate. Every night he walked alone through streets where no one recognized him, his cane clicking softly against the concrete. Each echo reminded him that the boy he once dismissed had done what grown men with power could not: restore justice, and in doing so, dismantle him. The true power of Malik Turner's story was never in the spectacle of a boy exposing corruption, nor in a judge miraculously standing again. It was in the method. Malik fought not with rage, but with precision. His weapon was evidence. His armor was truth. He proved that wisdom isn't measured in years, and power isn't measured in titles. That skin color, age, and circumstance mean nothing when the mind behind them refuses to yield. History would remember Malik not as a prodigy, but as a correction, an answer to a system that thought itself untouchable. And somewhere in a silent apartment, Judge Arthur Blake took another lonely step, reminded that some cures heal only the body, while others destroy the soul.